Hello and welcome to the Wild Wild West podcast. My name is Richie Richey of the MHRT Network, and we are officially in the dead of the offseason at this stage of the game. We're outside of all the interesting things that came from the Super Bowl and all that kind of stuff, and we're right into the mix of, frankly, what really sets up all of our teams for the rest of next season. And so you do not want to miss a single episode of the show as we break down your divisional rivals all together in one show. Makes us rather unique, actually, if you're going to be perfectly honest, in terms of a podcast. Over to my left here is the real Alex Givens. You can catch him over on Arrowhead Addict, and obviously the resident Kansas City Chiefs fan here on the podcast. Down directly below here is a Raider transplant, aka Angelo, who is filling in for Captain Jack. Super Bow. I don't know. I don't like that. That's not English. Come on,
You're talking about Kansas City Royal, Bo Jackson?
Dude, learn to speak. But anyways,
You did not just say that, Alex.
Hey man, made an all-star game.
Yeah. So Angelo's great. He's going to give you a lot of insight with regards to your Las Vegas Raiders. Brings a lot to the table here on the podcast. Love having him on the show. And down directly there, I even got the pointing right because it's all backwards here. If you're on camera, you'll understand. You have Robert there, who loves the big boys. I will let you unpack that on this podcast.
Do you actually have a Slater jersey?
I do have a Slater jersey. You're damn right I do.
You are from California, Robert, so that there is some insinuation there, which we will certainly get into as we go deeper into the podcast here. And again, there was innuendo in that comment too.
Pause.
Boom. On fire tonight, boys. On fire tonight. So we're going to go right in and we're going to start off. We're going to cover off, obviously, the offensive line breakdown on each of our teams, free agents, some things we need to look forward to, some position groups that we definitely need to look at, and some other things there. Obviously, scheme matters. So obviously, Robert, you're changing schemes right now, so you're in a bit of an unknown. Obviously, Angelo, you're in a similar position where you kind of have a bit of a question mark as well. Alex, you pretty much don't need to change much at all.
Mahomes.
Yeah, you got Mahomes, so just just do what you need to do.
Yeah, the worst ranked owner in the league. As long as you got Mahomes, you're all right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and of course, my Denver Broncos. We're in kind of the second year of what both the Raiders and the Chargers are going through, which is an interesting position to be in. It just really puts us all in a different spot, right, in terms of what we're dealing with. Ladies and gentlemen, all of you who are joining us live, by the way, love seeing these comments flow through. Keep them coming. We're going to start off with the franchise tag, who's been tagged, who hasn't, et cetera, et cetera. All of you who are joining us live, you can jump around in the comment. You'll see the links to each of our channels. Click those like buttons to get more people just like you into the show. You get a lot of feedback from the AFC West and start getting a lot of interesting folks here in the conversation to really start spinning stuff up. It helps the show out a lot. It helps us reach more people because there's this thing called an algorithm. And if you don't click those like buttons, the algorithm doesn't much care for us. And we would definitely like to have a lot more fans here on the show on any given Wednesday. That in mind, Alex, I'm going to throw over to you because really you're the one team with the recent news this past week that I think had, if we're going to be honest, it had the biggest impact for. I think that Snead was probably a cap casualty up until the recent news of the salary cap increase for the Kansas City Chiefs. And I think this could get really, really interesting for you guys, or at least it puts you in a position where you can do what you just did by tagging him. What are your thoughts?
So, obviously Snead, I think the only guy, I think out of any team that's been tagged at this point in our division. And yeah, I think they were going to do that probably regardless, because Veach has been, he's going to tag and he'll try to tag and trade, or they'll tag and then figure out a restructure to make it work. But he's not the type of guy to just say, go test the market on someone like that. he's going to see, because he's done tag and trades before. I think they did it with D Ford, and then did Seattle tagged Frank Clark, and then they traded for him and signed him to an extension. So I think the news of the $30 million increase certainly made it easier for him to do it, but I think they were probably going to do that regardless, just because he is going to command a big payday from somewhere. It's either going to, he's either going to play one more year in KC, and they're putting all the eggs in extending Chris Jones, or they find someone to get some sort of draft comp or player compensation back, and let him go somewhere else and work out an extension elsewhere. I know I said before, that the priority was not letting Chris Jones leave, and I think we, seen that kind of come to fruition, or they've kind of let that's what they're doing too by doing this. So, pretty much an expected move. We'll just see how it plays out from here.
I agree. I think you guys have some interesting, times ahead. I mean, you have some spots to fill, I think, on your team. I think you have a tackle that
not
needs
that
to
many though.
No, I actually agree with that. I do think that.
Hey Bishop, what did the Chiefs do in return? They won a Super Bowl in the Raiders Stadium, so you can enjoy your Christmas, bud.
Hey, since that got brought up, anyways, Alex, what do you think about opening game Thursday, Raiders versus Chiefs? You think Goodell will go ahead and do that one?
I don't know. Don't they usually do like a Super Bowl rematch though? I feel like it, or maybe I guess it's been Chargers Chiefs to start the year, the past couple years. So
well, you guys played the Lions to start this year, right?
Or the year before though, the Thursday night.
Yeah.
So, yeah. I don't know. I think we need to have some kind of AFC West matchup. That'd be a way to do it.
Yeah, to see that at the beginning. I wanted to ask you too, Alex. I don't know if you saw but I think the Chiefs granted Snead permission to seek a trade.
Yeah.
So
well, I think they just told them, hey, we're tagging you. Go find it else. If you want a big extension, go see if someone else will give it to you. Otherwise, you're playing here for $19 million. Which I mean, oh no, bad for them. But yeah. So like I said, Veach is not the type of guy to let someone that has tremendous amount of market power just hit the market. He's going to make sure they get something back in return, one way or the other. And I guess to kind of go with the cap, tagging news we're talking about, the Chiefs also cut MVS today, which was, I think, pretty much expected, but that saved about $12 million against the cap. And we'll see what happens with him. He certainly was a postseason hero, but, if you go look at his season stats versus what he got paid, it was like $2 million a yard almost. It's not that bad, but yeah. So, I think they're making the moves as expected.
And how much do you get paid per drop?
Yeah, that's about $5 million a drop. Crucial drop,
man.
But yeah, Chiefs are, I'd say at this point, making the moves as expected, and we'll just see how it shakes out with extending Chris Jones, and I think the dominoes kind of fall from there.
I was going to ask you, Alex, because of that Snead move and the Snead news for this week, do you really believe that your Chiefs are going to go all in on getting Chris Jones, or are you still a little worried that someone like the Detroit Lions could actually steal Chris Jones and do the whole Tyreek Hill type money?
Yeah, I mean, that's always a possibility, right? Like I said, I think that at this point, Chris Jones is going to, I think that the tagging shows they're going to be trying to work with them to get something that both sides feel is fair, but there's always that prospect of the throwing all the money at the table is the more lucrative, appealing approach. So, I mean, I'd say is always a risk, but I think just how the two sides have acted up to this point, I see a deal being done. And I mean, this isn't the first time they've gone through this with Chris Jones. I think 4 years ago at this point, they tagged him and then ended up working out a 4-year, $80 million extension. So, I think they'll be able to work something out. And I don't think that he's going to be, because to me, if he was all for like, I'm going to go get Aaron Donald money because it's my last contract, I think he would have been saying, we'd be hearing a little bit more about that at this point.
Right. No, I just bring it up obviously because of the same thing happened with Tyreek Hill. He was ready to sign with the Chiefs, and then the Dolphins came in and said, "We're not messing around, man. All up front, $70+ million guaranteed." So, there's obviously on the Raider news cycles, you'll always hear, "Oh, Chris Jones, he's going to come to the dark side." But I still don't think so. I mean, I think the Raiders could do you guys dirty and like offer them all this money just to hike up the price on your side. But I honestly don't think Chris Jones would come, even if we did offer him, crazy upfront money. And if the Raiders were to offer that crazy upfront money, I think they'd just be smart enough to offer it high enough that it's enough to screw you guys, but not so high that it screws us. So it's kind of like a win-win on the Raiders front office side. But someone like Detroit is a real thing. Going to the NFC, being with Dan Campbell, how he would change that entire young group. I mean, he would automatically, and that's why I bring up the Detroit Lions, because if Chris Jones were to go to Detroit Lions because they choose to tag Snead instead and try to work out a deal, I could just imagine that young Lions team using Chris Jones like their Shaq. He's the one piece that they needed in order to get over the hump and be in the Super Bowl. So just, want to get your thoughts on that one.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I don't know. I think that's kind of I think that's kind of a black and white way of thinking about it, though, because there's going to be teams that are going to offer more money. I feel like there's always teams that offer more money, and it, like I said, I think the understanding of staying in KC is like, I'm still going to get money that I feel I've earned, albeit not resetting market, but I'm going to be finishing my career out where I started. I'm going to be on a perennial Super Bowl contending roster to finish out my career. And now it's just seeing, what success we can build off of from here while I go, finish out my Hall of Fame career. So I think that's kind of like there's going to be teams, if not multiple teams, that offer him more money than the Chiefs are going to give him. And there's the other component that is, staying with what's familiar and all of that I think will play a factor in ultimately why he stays.
Yeah, I think this cap increase just will further cement that Chris Jones isn't going anywhere. The Chiefs look at this as like a big blessing and just be like, "Yep, he's not. We're going to be able to offer him the contract." Yeah, literally, we're going to be able to offer him the contract that he wants, and we're probably going to be able to. He's going to retire here. He'll sign his 4-year deal, probably 3-4-year deal, and try to go get another ring or two and then call it a career. And if he goes and wins, I'm not, saying he goes wins, but, the Chiefs go and win 1, 2, potentially, because you never even know with Mahomes, 3 more rings. You got to start looking at Chris Jones, and he continues to be, he continues to be the presence that he is on that defense. You really got to start looking at Chris Jones as a top 3 defensive player of all time, because the dominance that you just see, I mean, I hate to really even say it, but it's just greatness. You can't deny greatness. We hated Brady when he was winning all the time, but we couldn't deny him. We knew he was good. Now I'm comparing a quarterback to a defensive tackle, but comparing him to Aaron Donald, I mean, he's got Aaron Donald in championships and playoff success, like, easily. That's not even the question. Now you start bringing into the question of Lawrence Taylor. You start looking at Reggie White. You start looking at some of these other premium, legendary defensive players that not only had the stats, but had the rings with it. That's, we don't really look at defensive players needing rings like that. But if you have those stats to go along with the hardware at that position, man.
Actually, you're not necessarily.
You sound like a Chiefs fan, Robert.
Listen, man. I'm a football fan above all else, and it's just as a football fan, you can't deny it.
I'm going to be honest, Robert. You looked at it from a bit of the wrong perspective in my mind, and this is, I think, the way to truly look at it. There is a reason why, Mean Joe Green and some of these other guys are seen, in that tier, and it's because they themselves were the reason, right? And so we spoke about on last show. For those of you who didn't watch it, go back, give it a watch. We actually covered some of this actually on last show, very clearly and actually in quite a bit of detail. So I do encourage you to go back and give that a watch or a listen, depending on how you enjoy our podcast. But when we were speaking about that last week, you start to look at how those guys mesh with their teams and if they are in fact the reason. So looking at Chris Jones, as much as it's going to pain me to agree, I actually agree and probably go a bit further than you, if I'm going to be honest, is the Chiefs were not looking great for a good portion of that game. And it wasn't Mahomes who got that team together on the sideline. It was Chris Jones. And Alex, that's undeniable. Like you saw the video, like the video was on display.
I mean, I have not denied that.
Yeah, like the video was on display, and you have this, defensive tackle who's basically got the ear of like 95% of the locker room and said, start pulling your weight. If we want to win this thing again, you got to do you got to, level up. And you started to see as soon as he started stepping in that, and actually, Robert, this is actually where the big difference is between the goods and the greats. And frankly, at this point here, I have to put Chris Jones in that great category right now. It's undeniable, which is he not only rallied his team, but he also showed and led through example.
Backed it up.
He backed up his words on the sideline with 2 critical plays to continue to ladder up that team. If you're going to look for another player, recency bias within the AFC West to do something similar, although not exactly, but still certainly to cement the team to go to Super Bowl victory, that would be Von Miller.
Okay.
Okay. And so you basically saw him say, "We need to win this. Hold my beer." And say, "Cam Newton's mine. Don't worry, I got it." Right? And you saw that in the biggest game. You saw that in the biggest moments. And you heard the way he spoke after the game, where he just knew Chris Jones is in the same boat. He just knew that as long as he did the thing and said the thing, we're good. And there's only a handful of players that are in that category. Tom Brady's one of them. Peyton Manning, I would argue, is in that category as well. I'd say Chris Jones is in that. LT is in that. You have a few guys that are just, I would argue Von Miller in that era was certainly in that category as well. He was a guy that would get double and triple teamed and still win anyway. Just because he was that darn good, right? Obviously, as these guys age and they start getting to the back part of their career, it then becomes of legacy, which is, can you take what you have learned, pass it on to the next guy who's behind you to then say, no, not only was I, here, but I also trained the other guy behind me to also be here. Thanks. I'll take my gold jacket tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right. It is what it is. Right.
Yeah.
And there's only a handful of guys that are in that category. And frankly, Chris Jones is, as far as I'm concerned, he's already there.
Yeah. I definitely, in that regard to the the intangibles that some of those players, like you just mentioned, Brady, Manning, like forget their on the field play, which was obviously fantastic, but you're right, they had those intangibles of getting in the faces of their teammates and holding their teammates accountable. And on top of that, they delivered themselves. They were like, I would never ask anything of any of you that I wouldn't do myself.
Yes.
And that's what Jones is basically is for that defense and honestly for that team, because I know Mahomes is the leader. Obviously, we get all that. But the glue and the heart and soul of that team right now, especially, is in that defense, and it's in Chris Jones. So that's why I think, just to obviously circle back and to make a long story short and a short story long, you got to re-sign him. I mean, it's almost a must at this point. I feel like the offseason would be a failure if you don't re-sign him, no matter what happens.
So here's the other piece to look at here, and this is the way I look at it. Who else is better than him in the league?
Oh,
at his
position?
At his position?
No, at his position.
No one.
Because if you, at defensive tackle, he's the best one.
No one.
Right, but the point is, even on a defensive line, generally speaking, if you're going to be
the best pass rusher in the league right now.
Yeah. Like that's the point, right?
You're gonna I said arguably he's up there.
See, now you guys are getting out. I mean, look, you can say what you want to say, and yes, he's won the 3 Super Bowls, blah blah blah. But it sure does help when you're in a team with Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and Andy Reid.
How does that affect the defense?
Alex,
you can't not put okay, look. No, let me just say this, because you guys are saying Chris Jones.
You got triggered.
I'm going to put Max Crosby as a freakish. Okay, all I'm saying is this. Let me just say this. They interviewed people at the Combine today. They interviewed people like Demarcus Robinson, Latte Latu, every single person, and you could actually look it up on it. One of the interviews was on, or a few of the interviews was on NBC. Every single one of those guys all said they modeled their entire game because of Max Crosby. They're watching Max Crosby, they're learning Max Crosby. There's things that Max Crosby can do, and he's still developing. But there's freakish things that Max Crosby can do in where he's changing the game so much, like in a LeBron kind of a way, that a lot of other younger people are modeling their games after him. I haven't heard any Combine people talk about Chris Jones that way yet. So if the conversation we're having is who's better than Chris Jones, like it's hard to say anyone's better than Chris Jones, but to not be like, well, if we're talking D-line, rushing, I don't know, man. I think we'll be singing a different tune here real soon once Max Crosby actually gets some help.
So
because with no help, he's amazing. So with no help, he's Michael Jordan.
I think you just got triggered, though. I wasn't trying to slight Max Crosby. I just said Chris Jones is one of, if not arguably, the best pass rusher in the league. Like that. I mean, that's not an inaccurate statement. He's certainly up there. Because he's kind of a one of a like Max Crosby is, I mean, in his own right, a one of a kind pass rusher. The stuff he does off the edge, same as Chris Jones is one of a kind in his own way, because he can pretty much play on any 0 to 9 and get pressure. So I mean, they're it's not apples to oranges, those two, with how they go about doing things. But yeah, I wasn't trying to just telling you and the Raiders fans in the chat, I wasn't trying to diss Max Crosby. I like Max Crosby.
Okay. All right.
My comments as well were not to slander Max Crosby, but at the end of the day, if you're going to be truthful and honest with yourself, there were years where, like Max Crosby, Chris Jones was the only real option in KC. Okay. And the difference between Max Crosby and Chris Jones is Chris Jones was still the difference maker. Legitimately still the difference maker. Now, did he still have the same impact that he does today with the additions of Karlaftis and some of the other players that the
Tranquil and
no. Okay. No. But the point is, though, is that there was a block of time in KC where Andy Reid truly did not believe that a defense actually mattered on a football team. Okay, he was like, a defense is optional. I have Tyreek Hill and I have Tyreek Hill, I have Patrick Mahomes, I have Travis Kelce, and I have a couple other wide receivers. We're gonna throw the football over the yard, and it's gonna be comical. And he kind of wasn't wrong, but at the same time, that can only last for so long, because eventually, you have to pay the piper, right? And so, the cap is a real thing.
But for the Rams,
right? And exactly. So the whole point here is that when you're looking at tagging players, when you're looking at re-signing players, and you're looking at the impact of players, Chris Jones arguably is that guy, and just as Max Crosby is that guy on your defense. Now, if you're going to go all the way down the rabbit hole on Max Crosby, I would then go all the way down the rabbit hole on Max Crosby and say that your team has been negligent.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%.
And
if Max Crosby was with the Chiefs, he would have 3 Super Bowls right now. And in fact, let me say this. If it was Max Crosby instead of Chris Jones that was with the Chiefs, he would still have the 3 Super Bowls right now. So,
yeah, probably.
Yeah, I'm just saying. That's why it's like
probably beating Brady.
I don't want to do
you probably are.
You know what I'm saying? I don't want to do the one-on-one Chris Jones versus Max Crosby. I get it; they're both in different positions. But yes, the Raiders have been completely negligent with a guy that we've had now for 5 years, where he should have already at least won a bunch of playoff games, and instead he's the one. To me, Max Crosby is Michael Jordan, and the Pistons are beating him up until he finally gets his Scottie Pippen and Horace Grant and everybody else, right? That's where we're at, which is what we're working on, by the way, Alex, which is why I've been saying I'm glad you enjoyed the last win at Allegiant, because that will be the last time you win in our home. Right, I'm not saying you guys won't beat us. I'm just saying that's the last time you're going to win in our home stadium. So,
well, I would imagine that's the last time they're going to win a Super Bowl in your home stadium.
Yeah.
The fact is that your team still actually has to do the right thing.
That's right.
And again, if you're going to be honest, and I mean truly honest, your team has yet to do the right thing.
Yeah.
But and up until last year, even to be blunt, and bring in a pass rusher to complement Crosby. You guys never replaced Finlaw, who was an absolute beast in the interior. And
you should have never let Khalil Mack go. Yeah, you can keep going.
Yeah. But this is the thing, right? Which is, you have made mistake after mistake within front office decisions when it comes to not complementing an elite pass rusher, and Max Crosby is an elite pass rusher. He is. I'm sorry.
To be fair, though, they did. I mean, they tried to bring in Chandler Jones, and it didn't pan out. No one.
Chandler Jones was
going to go complete CTE mid-contract, but that was a solid signing at the time, and a solid complimentary piece to Max Crosby for what was available. It's not like they weren't trying to do stuff. Just hasn't
for what
worked.
Was available, I agree. But the problem with Chandler Jones is that
he was so old.
He's a system guy who works as a cog who can then excel when he is a competent cog. So, for example, when you looked at what he did in Arizona, which I believe is where he came from before.
How is he a system guy, dude? He's got 12 plus sacks every year. That's just being a beast at rushing the passer. That's not a system.
Right, but when here's an example, right? So, for example, you have certain guys, and frankly, I'm going to point to you, Robert, and then look at how this same player is doing with the Raiders. You have coach's least favorite defensive lineman, who is now with the Raiders, who went from looking like trash with the Chargers.
You talking about Tillery?
I am.
Well,
Did he really?
First round.
Yeah. Don't ask me why we took him in the first round. That was
no, but Robert, this is my point though, is to Alex's point, and the reason what I'm trying to say in terms of what I'm pointing out here is systems and fit matters. And Chandler Jones was able to go from a system that meshed with him because he had an absolute defensive genius as a head coach. Sorry, I don't really care who's going to try. Belichick is a defensive genius.
He's a genius.
But Belichick wasn't his coach. Belichick was his coach for like 3 years. Then he was in Arizona.
Right. But this is my point, though. He then had the fortune of moving to another team that meshed his strengths with their scheme, and he did well. And he did well doing it. This is not a shock. Like, this is the equivalent of you taking an offensive lineman who's an outside zone guy and saying, "Dude, go play power. Good luck. See how you do. You're gonna suck." Right? Like that's the point. And it's also no different than a tweener at a linebacker position in a scheme that doesn't fit a tweener at a linebacker position. Like all of these schemes all matter. How you mesh these people together all matters. And in my opinion, the Raiders made a mistake. The Raiders brought in Chandler Jones thinking, and I'm not saying this is correct, but they thought that because his success in two different teams, Arizona and the Patriots, they thought that he was a scheme agnostic type of guy.
Right.
And they thought that his skill sets were just easily transferable.
Right.
Now, not to mention, he clearly has some challenges, and and fair enough. All of those things can be true. Multiple things can be true at the same time. And I know that in today's society, we like to forget that that's a fact, but it is a fact. Things are multidimensional, and we need to factor those into the scenario. But at the end of the day, in my opinion, from what I've been able to see, the scheme in Arizona fit Chandler Jones, and they made it fit Chandler Jones, and he did really well there. The scheme in the Patriots fit Chandler Jones, and he did really, really well there. The Raiders took him and said, "We believe because you've done well everywhere else you've been that you are scheme agnostic," and they failed to recognize that what made him good was not the things that the Raiders were trying to do. And on top of that, like above and beyond that, it was clear that Chandler Jones was struggling, and that's being kind, with some personal issues and personal things, which, by the way, he was also struggling with when he was with other teams. Okay? It's just when you keep getting your head hit and you have challenges, it stands to reason that you're probably going to have those challenges, and I'm talking mental challenges as an individual, exasperated more and more and be more and more egregious, because that's what the evidence clearly shows at this point. And on top of that, there are certain people just genetically, I look at Sidney Crosby in the NHL as an example, which is one of those guys, or the Lindrosses, for example, both brothers, who are amazing hockey players. And I mean like generational hockey players, like as in like, holy crap, are they ever good? Their bodies just couldn't take the abuse at the NHL level. And not everyone is capable or able to take physical abuse like some of these other guys can. And so there's a sliding scale. How good are you and how much can your body take? They don't always align. As much as fans would love to them to be perfect like that, not everyone is perfectly aligned like that, and people's bodies can't always take all the things. I come from like a third generation of playing contact sports. Like, I know that if I were to pursue high-level contact sports, I'd be perfectly fine. Why? It's in my family's genetics. Like, we're good. I know other guys that literally got hit once and they've never been able to play again. Like, their head is still like not right. And so, I mean, Alex, I'm sure you played with some dudes in college that are in the same boat.
Oh yeah.
Right? Like for sure. Like like you and I could be on it, like for sure, right? And that's just a
Mhm.
fact. Genetics are a thing, and they play a huge role. Not everyone, despite physical attributes, can play at this level. It's a fact. So that's where I'm at with Chandler Jones. And I think, to your point, Alex, they tried. I agree, but I also think
that's all I was trying to say was they've been trying to get that fit, but I didn't mean to go down this rabbit hole of Chandler Jones's life.
No, but it's
Here we are.
It's more than that though. It's the equivalent of like MVS doing well with another team, but not with you during the regular season.
No, but I would push back a little though that every scheme, regardless of what they look for, needs an edge rusher who knows how to get after the quarterback. That is uniform across whatever you play, whether it's a 3-4, 4-3, whatever you're looking for. The fact of the matter is, on third down and passing downs, you're going to want Chandler Jones to be lined up on the edge of one of these tackles and figure out a way to get there. And he knows how to do that, and he did that in two different schemes. So, I mean, regardless of what he fit in other ideologies, I mean, that is still, like I said, a uniform trait in what they look for. And when they signed him, he was coming off 10.5 sacks in a Pro Bowl year. I don't know who wouldn't give someone money off after doing that, considering they have 112 sacks in their career. Like that's someone you absolutely like. I mean, every team was probably trying to sign him. Maybe some teams screened him a little further, or like, oh, maybe we don't do that. I mean, who would have thought that everything would happen after the fact? But at the time, I mean, somewhat injury-riddled guy who had 100 sacks in his career and just got 10.5. Yeah, here's some money for a 2-3 year deal. And, no one was saying that was stupid. And like Khalil Mack, same age, if not older. And I mean, it's just as much of a risk. Like someone could trade for Mack and, give him some more money, and then he just falls right off too. I mean,
right. Well, the other thing too, Alex, and you're, I mean, your point was good, Alex. It's just that if you were to say to me that during that time when the Chandler Jones move was made, we had the same coaching consistency that the Kansas City Chiefs has had, then it was a good move, right? Yeah. But that's the problem with the Raiders, Rich, is stupidity in the front office, right?
Yeah, I think Josh McDaniels definitely helped.
And that's why we have fixed that. So why is Max Crosby so happy? Why is Max Crosby so happy to the point where he said, if you don't sign Antonio Pierce, all bets are off. I'll go ask for a trade or whatever, right? So now that he does have it, that's the first move of us doing right by him. The first move of us doing right by him is giving him the coaches that he wants. The next move is going to be what we're talking about now in this show every single Wednesday, which is what are all the different pieces that we're going to add. So, I still trust Telesco, Robert.
So
good luck.
So, Robert, I obviously now over to you. The Broncos have not tagged anyone. There's been some modest talk about maybe tagging Lutz, the kicker. I'm not convinced that's going to happen.
I knew it was a kicker year.
Peyton's guy.
I think that a deal will just get done naturally as we start right sizing the cap and stuff. Because I think he's tied to Peyton. Like I think he feels he owes Peyton. So I'm not that I think is wonderful fodder for NFL.com to put out as an article because they had to meet their quota that day. But
give us a franchise tag for all 32 teams.
Yeah. All right, wait, that guy. Yeah, that guy. Yeah.
Kicker. Yeah.
But and obviously the Raiders have all but basically said we are not tagging anyone. So
I mean, $14 million for Josh Jacobs. If it was any of you, would you do it? $14 million?
I wouldn't do it, but come on over if you're not going to go to the Raiders. Come on over if you don't want to do it.
Well,
not for 14. I wouldn't franchise tag him.
No. Richest team can't offer anything. The Chiefs aren't going to offer anything.
Chiefs don't need running backs. They find them.
Chiefs are fine at running back.
I mean, if I'm the Raiders, he didn't have a great year, but then the question is that because of your head coach and the scheme, or is that because
of O-line?
I mean, the 2 years ago, he led the league in rushing. Like
that's also true.
and I'll keep this one short too, because I know we're trying to get into the things that make it important. But
Yes.
we had a really great offensive line scenario for Josh Jacobs during the year that he balled out. At the same time, though, during the year that he balled out, and I compare this to the fight world, where if you're just rusty, period, even though you may look like you can fight and you can get in that ring right away, if you haven't been in there for a while, it's very difficult to get right into rhythm. Versus fighters who, like in the old days, Sugar Ray Robinson was fighting every 2 weeks. So no duh, he won 260 matches because he was just used to going in there, right? During the year that Josh Jacobs ran for almost 1,700 yards, people might forget that he did every single practice, he did every single training thing. He played in the preseason games, and he rolled it right into the regular season, and he was basically challenged. It was like, oh, well, you don't want me? Well, let me show you how good I am, right?
Well, he was also playing for money, though, which
the mistake he made is going into this year, he tried to do the Chris Jones, right? He tried to do the whole, well, if you're not really going to pay me, then, I'm worth a certain way. And by the time he got in and by the time he got rolling, his body wasn't conditioned enough, which is what got him injured. He's not as good. He's not as crisp. The line's not in sync, which you talk about, Rich. The chemistry wasn't there. So the difference this time is it's like, okay, man, you gambled on your last year, and we're going to send you out to the free agency market. Go ahead. So let me ask you this, Rich. Do you believe that a team like the Dallas Cowboys will offer him more money than what the Raiders would offer him anyways?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Over Saquon, though?
Yeah.
Over Saquon?
Oh, definitely over
I
Saquon.
think the allure with Jacobs is one, he wasn't the featured back at Alabama, so he doesn't have 4 years of SEC just ground and pound work, and that was a big thing when they drafted him. Like, he has a lot of tread. And then looking at Saquon's been hurt like damn near every year. I mean, he, when healthy, probably a better runner and space creator than Jacobs is, but Jacobs has the fortune of not having any sort of injury asterisk to him. So, I mean, I think he's just I think of all the people that are going to hit the market, he's the one that would command the most money. Now, I think that the NFL as a whole is definitely not investing in running backs like they would want or like we see. And I think we're going to see a lot of teams take the Chiefs kind of approach and what other teams have done and spend just later picks on running backs and see who hits. I mean, Chiefs have taken running backs like 5th round or later, outside of Edwards-Helaire, like almost every other draft, and, find someone to get into the system. And you look at like the Eagles and some of these other teams, they're all committees. So I don't know. It's an interesting time to be a running back, and it's an interesting time with how teams assess it and go after that. Because it's like, I feel like if this was 10 years ago, like Saquon Barkley or Josh Jacobs are never hitting the open market. They're either getting traded to someone who's going to pay him an assload of money, or the Giants and Raiders would pay him an assload of money. But now everyone's like, no, I'll just find someone else like that's going to play for the allure of getting money. And then when it comes to that point, say, see ya.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But let's be honest though. So let's look at, I mean, these are, I don't want to say a dying breed, but they are certainly a rare breed in today's NFL. So you have Josh Jacobs, and in the same category, I would also put a dude like Derrick Henry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. In terms of the style of runner that they are. And the reason
running.
And
like bell cow guys.
Bell
like
cow
guys.
That's exactly
I'd say Jacobs, Henry, Jonathan Taylor, probably the only three bell cow guys out there.
Zeke used to be that until they ran him into the ground.
When Saquon was good, he was kind of a bell cow guy too, though.
No, he's
bell
not.
cow backs don't really catch out of the backfield like that. You were straight running and pounding it.
I think bell cow like 25, 30 touches a game.
Yeah.
Like Saquon's dumb.
No.
Yeah.
What makes a bell cow is the evolution of their gameplay. And what I mean by that is, and so I will disagree across the board with how you defined it for literally only one reason. As you gave Derrick Henry the ball more, he wore down the opposing defense more and started to basically play chess against the defense's checkers. And what I mean by that is he would find one or two dudes that he would wear down on the defensive line, maybe 3 dudes, and would just absolutely demolish them. And then as he went through the game and as you got into the third and fourth quarter, you started to see these, like he went from 2 yards a carry to 4 yards a carry to 7 yards a carry to 14 yards a carry. And you're just like, what is going on?
Can't stop it.
Right. And so that is a true bell cow. That is literally, in my opinion, the definition of a bell cow back, which is
it's coming.
They're playing chess when every other running back is thinking that they're playing backgammon or snakes and ladders. Right. And so you have a strategic dude that is identifying things on the field, that is working with the offensive line, that is working with the offensive coordinator, and they're all working together in tandem to say, dude, when you get 30 yards or 30 carries or 20 carries or 19 or whatever carries it is, by the time you hit carry 19, 17, 15, 14, you're getting 9 yards a carry. Or there's always the possibility that at that point you're taking it to the house.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's your Derrick Henrys. That is your Josh Jacobs. Let's be honest. He's had games like that for sure.
It's like Emmitt Smith. Yeah. Emmitt Smith. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so they're playing targeted football. They are playing at a different level, at a different tier. I just want to shout out Biggie Bronco. Thank you for joining the show. Appreciate it.
Biggie's back, dude.
Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it.
Return to the Biggie.
Yep. But that's how I define a bell cow, which is as you feed them the ball more, they start to navigate the game and they start to wear down the opposing defense. They start to target certain guys as the game goes on. And it's literally like watching a game of chess. Pacheco has had games. I'm not saying he is, but I'm saying he's had games, Alex, where he has had that model, but he is not a bell cow back because he hasn't done it consistently. Okay.
No, they don't need him to be though. So it's
I also agree with that too. But the point is, your Derrick Henrys, your Josh Jacobs, your guys that are in that level, they're a different breed. They're a breed that's hard to find, by the way, because they have to be able to absorb the impact and not die. Okay, like physically. And so they are rare. They used to be the norm, Angelo. They used to be the norm. That used to be the standard, and that is
couldn't win without one.
Yeah. Well, that's why I said what I said earlier, though, because it's like you mentioned Pacheco, and he has games where he's a bell cow, but teams Chiefs and other teams, they get these RBs that they don't need to go out and wear defenses down every week. Like, we just need you to wear them down when the game plan calls for it, or when the moment in the game calls for it. So that's why I think we're going to see kind of a trend across the league where we're not really valuing running backs. We're just going to take guys later, or give aging guys minimum deals and just kind of do a rotation and hope one of them can be our bell cow when we need it. Because for us to 32 teams in the league, and for us to mention only 3 guys, and I guess you could say Nick Chubb, if healthy, probably the only other guy.
Nick Chubb.
But so, okay, 32 teams, and we're naming 4 guys that are really probably only true bell cows, and one is a pending free agent who's probably close to retiring. Kind of the writing's on the wall there for how teams are looking at this position and valuing them.
Oh, the writing's been on the wall for I feel like almost a year and a half now.
On there now.
Yeah, they're giving you a full picture about it now, how they feel about running backs.
Yeah, but so here's the question though: is okay, then why do these guys stick out so much?
I think it's because they just have that. Honestly, you know what it is? Derrick Henry just sticks out because he's just a behemoth.
No, he's a beast, man.
Yeah, I mean, that dude is just absolute. I mean, he stands out in a crowd of millions.
He is an alien. He's not a human.
We have this
How can he be
tier
that big, that strong, and run that fast?
and that fast.
He would still be awesome if he doesn't retire for like another, let's say, 5 or 6 years. He would still be awesome to be in your team as the goal line back.
Oh, absolutely!
Like,
I wouldn't want to face that. Who wants to line up across from that? But again, he's in his own tier. To kind of put him with the rest of the guys, we said Chubb, we said Taylor, we said Jacobs. It's really all about staying healthy. That's the biggest thing about being a bell cow.
Right.
And it's being able, like Rich said as well, you got to be able to absorb that contact and you got to be able to play through that. We saw Zeke pretty much die after 3 years of being the best, and it wasn't even close. He was the best running back in football for 3 years. He started as the best running back in football straight out of college. Drafted him, I think it was 2 or 3.
It was early.
It was early. They took him super early because that was the same year Bosa was in that draft. Joey
5.
Bosa. 2, right? Yeah.
Third.
Yeah, because I think Bosa was 3rd or something like that. So he was a super high pick. They got 3 years out of him. He was the best running back in the league for 3 years, and he is just, I mean, it's not even, it's night and day. And they drafted him in what, 2016? Right? Like, it hasn't even been a decade yet.
Right, but this is the point, is that Josh Jacobs, I don't see Zeke as a bell cow running back.
He was.
No, he wasn't. He was used as a bell cow running back, but he's not a bell cow running back. The running backs in the NFL level before, as in like the true ones, like the legit ones, like let's
he's talking about like Emmitt Smith, like big body guys with huge legs that can take the pounding.
Right.
Earl Campball.
Right.
Yeah, Earl Campbell. Yeah.
Christian Okoye, when the Chiefs had Christian Okoye, big dudes.
Right. So look at the guys that we used to see. Right. We used to see guys sustain full seasons of much more violent football than we are seeing in today's game, if we're going to be honest.
Right.
The difference that we have now is we have guys that are faster and bigger than they used to be and be able to hit harder than they used to be, but without being as violent. Like that's kind of the difference. But at the end of the day, though, back in the day when you had the legit bell cows, they were getting hit. Either they were avoiding contact, like your Emmitt Smiths, who were able to do the thing at a high level by not getting hit hard. Or you had guys that were simply being able to absorb the hits, ignore it, and keep playing through it. So the question now is,
Campbell.
So the question is why are we seeing such a difference in today's NFL? Why are we seeing a difference in these running backs? You know, I look at a Broncos running back like a Willis McGahee in the way that he was running the ball. I look at a guy like C.J. Anderson and the way he ran the ball.
No, Sean Moreno.
No, Moreno was a one-hit wonder. But I look at C.J. Anderson in terms of the way he ran the ball. He was a guy that would absorb impact, run guys over, and take it to the house on a consistent basis. And he did it for a sustained period of time with their team, right? And I think that's great. And frankly, in my opinion, C.J. Anderson was actually underutilized by the Denver Broncos, but that's a topic for a different show. But anyways, the point here is this, is your bell cows, the ones that we're talking about here, the ones that we're referring to in that unique tier in the NFL, in today's NFL, they are, in my opinion, just as valuable as they once were. And the reason for that is the best of the best, the Derrick Henrys, the Josh Jacobs, I'm just going to use those two as an example, and Nick Chubb, who I'm going to put in that same category. Is they force teams to play different.
Yes.
Because they are that damn good. Okay. And most of these guys that we just spoke about, all three, Chubb, Henry, and Jacobs, they can all catch out of the backfield.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so in today's NFL, what that allows you to do is you can play them on all 4 downs if you need to. Right? You can put them in multiple spots on the offense. You can have a flexible offense as a result. And on top of that, you can wear down the opposing defense with one guy as opposed to having to spread that capital across 3 different guys, which often exceeds the amount that you pay that one guy. And in addition to that, you want the young guys coming into the NFL to learn from someone like that. That's a different style of work ethic. Like that, like,
right?
Yeah.
And they don't really train that. I mean, that's one of the things that Kurt Warner talked about with college football now versus what it used to be like, right? Where now it's hard to tell what's going to translate. So you're going to hear about Braylon Allen this year, big back out of Wisconsin. But is he a Josh Jacobs type? I don't know yet. We'll see, because A.J. Dillon, the Green Bay Packers thought A.J. Dillon was going to be a Josh Jacobs type. And did he end up being a Josh Jacobs type, guys? Not at all. So, and then the other thing too, Rich, like you said, is the game's changed. You can rotate them now. You just rotate them, you know, which is why
I was going to say,
I said, this is why I asked you, Rich, is there a team that would pay him like the Cowboys? And you said yes.
Yes.
But when you say that, you're like, you're telling me that the Cowboys will pay him money, but is that money that we wouldn't match anyways?
Yes.
So I'm talking about all-in money. You know, like, so you think the Cowboys will pay $14 million all in to Josh Jacobs? I don't think so.
Yes, I also think the Steelers would too.
Oh, I don't think they would. They already have 2 good running backs in Najee and in Jaylen Warren. Not to say that they are Josh Jacobs. I am not saying that at all. But they are. I feel like they're pretty confident in what they got in their running back room currently.
And I also think you have some other teams that are going to be in similar positions that are going to be needing a running back who can really put them over the top. Like, as an example, you mentioned Angelo last show, and you haven't mentioned it this show yet, but the Texans would be another example. It's like, okay, so
that's right.
You have a quarterback. You have a quarterback on a rookie deal, and you have some pretty good pieces on that team.
Right.
And man, if you added Josh Jacobs to that roster.
True. Except for this, Rich. Except for this, and this is kind of what we're going to get into in the show, is they thought Dameon Pierce was going to do that. He didn't do it. And then Devin Singletary did do it. And now Devin Singletary's a free agent too. So let's say you're the Texans and you're willing to offer Josh Jacobs $14 million a year, all in, 3-year deal, 4-year, whatever, guaranteed, right? Then what stops the Raiders from going, okay, great. Hey, Devin Singletary, why don't you come over here? We'll also sign, I don't know, Austin Eckler on a small deal. We'll go ahead and get, hey, Derrick Henry, do you want to be the 3rd down back and come here too and get the Nevada State tax?
Are you saying Eckler's a small guy?
He is.
You're not wrong.
I don't think Eckler's going to sign a small guy.
No, all I'm saying is that what makes Josh Jacobs' ability to negotiate at this point is the leverage isn't really there like it used to be. He doesn't really have like Saquon Barkley. Saquon Barkley could get offered less money by the Cowboys, and do you guys think Saquon wouldn't do great with the Cowboys? You know what I'm saying? Like,
no, he wouldn't be hurt.
You think Saquon would be hurt? So you're really high on Josh Jacobs, and you think Saquon's like way down here?
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's kind of where I stand too. I'm not gonna lie.
You asked the question.
But Saquon's definitely more of a risk, in my opinion.
Look, here's the deal, right? Josh Jacobs has shown to be consistent around here.
Okay.
He has shown to be able to catch out of the backfield. He's shown to be able to take over games. He's been able to do great things. Frankly, as a Broncos fan, the dude has killed us.
Yeah. True.
Okay.
That's
sorry, but not sorry. Like, it's just a fact, right? Okay. So let's be real. The guy has shown out, as far as I'm concerned, that he can be that guy. And we weren't the only ones he killed. So I have that as a bit of a saving grace to say that it's not just my team. He's done that to other teams as well. Now, put him on the right roster with the right group of guys on the right team. And do I think like 14, 13, or even like 12.5 mil a year is absolutely worth it? Yeah. Why? Because you're going to sign a guy like Jacobs. You're going to let the other overpriced veterans go, but you're going to use Jacobs as the guy. And he deserves to be the guy because he's shown that he should be the guy. And then you're going to go out into the draft or into the undrafted free agent market, and you're going to find a guy or two or three in that kind of lower tier, and you're going to bring them into your room, to Alex's point, and you're going to say, Josh, we are paying you more than what you are likely worth from other teams, and our expectation of you is to look down in the room and elevate other guys with you, because you and I both know that based on your position group, you're pretty much near the end of your career. We gave you the bag for a reason. Now, Josh Jacobs seems like he's a very rational person, because he's shown that with the Raiders, if we're going to be honest as well. And he's probably going to say, I agree, we're good.
I will take my money and I will come in and give you a hard 9 to 5 each and every day. Prepare these guys as best I can.
And in my opinion, there's 4 or 5 teams that fit that bill. And I think that's fair. Now, am I saying that fits every team? No. Am I saying that is the right thing to do for all the teams in the NFL? No. Would I ever do it for my Denver Broncos with where we're at right now? Absolutely not. And I say that over and over and over again. Because, man, we have so many holes on our roster that we need help almost everywhere. But there are plenty of teams that are in that group. The Texans are one, as an example, who can knock it out the park with that move. I would also argue that another team like the Kansas City Chiefs would be another interesting spot for Jacobs, because he is a guy that would complement the offense.
I don't think it would happen.
No, I don't think so either. But the point is that he is a guy that would effectively be what the law firm was supposed to be for the Kansas City Chiefs. Your draft pick a few years ago.
How about Ben Jarvis, Green Ellis? No, I'm kidding.
No.
Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Clyde Edwards-Helaire.
And so Helaire was supposed to be that guy for the Chiefs. He didn't really work out, but I would argue that Jacobs has proven that he is the type of back that they were hoping Helaire would be. So could he work out? Maybe. Does it make sense for the Chiefs? Depends on where they're at in cap. But I think that if the Chiefs wanted to reinvigorate their offense, having a two-headed monster at the running back position and then bolstering the room with like undrafted guys that have potential would certainly be a way of going about it. Is it the way they're going to go about it? Probably not. Could it be? Sure. Why not? Because I think if they want to run it back, literally speaking, then they're going to need a complementary running back into the latter part of the year when the weather gets colder, especially depending on where certain teams fit in terms of the playoff race. They're going to need a solid running game, and Josh Jacobs will certainly give them that. Just, again, my 2 cents for whatever it's worth. Because you guys have
Henry,
or
Derrick Henry.
Oh God, don't even say that.
What I was gonna say though is, I mean, it was a little bit ago now, but Richie, you asked like why did we mention those 4 guys? And I think if you look at like those 4 guys on those 4 teams and the scheme they're in, like they are a huge focal point of the offense moving the ball. Like, I mean, Raiders rely on Josh Jacobs, regardless if the run game's working or not, to move the fluidity of their offense and build off of that with play action. And, also because of Aiden O'Connell. So same with Nick Chubb in Cleveland. Jonathan Taylor, rookie QB, he didn't even have a QB up to this point, but they had to use the hell out of him.
Minshew Mania, baby.
I mean, Derrick Henry has been the whole offense in Tennessee since he became Derrick Henry. So, I think there's fewer teams in the league that do that rely on the running back position so heavily. And, I think the one thing in common is all those teams don't have a quote unquote elite QB to, throw the ball, or the different type of running back that we see in like McCaffrey, who's basically a glorified receiver to some degree. I mean, McCaffrey is kind of in his own right, but I mean, we definitely saw a change once McCaffrey came in of what running backs they go for. And that's the speedy, shifty guy that can catch out of the backfield, with a select few of teams continue to, prioritize the bell cow. So, I just say all that with I think those guys have some bargaining power in the sense of like, well, if Josh Jacobs leaves the Raiders and they don't adequately replace him without drastically changing QB, like things are going to get worse, in my opinion, there. And I mean, same for any of those other 3 teams, because they've been so reliant on the run game, where we don't see other teams use that as much and use more committees. So that's why I think we're going to see a larger spread of teams not really using the run, or, paying some guy to be the guy and pay, 3 guys really small amounts to be, part of the guy.
Yeah.
I want to.
Just real quick. I'll make it quick, Robert.
No, real quick.
To Alex's point, and I'm just so that it doesn't sound like I'm not a Josh Jacobs guy. I'm one of the biggest Josh Jacobs guys. Part of the reason is that he's Filipino, and in the Filipino community, we regard him as the #1 Filipino player in the entire NFL, right? So everybody knows that. It's a big deal to the Philippines. He's a big deal. I would love for him to be a Raider, but I'd like for him to get paid too. The one thing that makes people go, well, let's let Josh Jacobs go into free agency. Let's see what happens. Is Zamir White ran 100 yards a game for 4 straight games with the okay-ish line that we had. Imagine what happens when we put money into our line. Is Zamir White that good then? And we don't even know if Britton Brown's that good yet because he was injured. Now we got Tyler McAllister, Sincere McCormick. So anyways, go ahead, Robert. But
yeah. No, I that's actually perfect that you said that. It's a perfect segue into what I was going to say. To kind of answer Rich's point from earlier, the reason why we don't have those bell-back cows in the league anymore is because it's a QB-driven league now. And back then, it was a running back-driven league. It was you brought your defense, you brought your O-line, you brought your run game, and that was how you won games. Now it's where you need a quarterback to win, and it's so funny you mentioned the four running backs: Josh Jacobs, Nick Chubb, Derrick Henry, Jonathan Taylor. They've all had fantastic seasons and great team success, but it's never amounted, and it hasn't even really gotten close to championship level success.
Henry was
the Titans.
Who?
Henry was in the
closest.
championship game 1 year.
Henry. Yeah. That 1 year, Henry was the closest. Besides that, the Raiders haven't done much. The Colts haven't done much. Like I said, they've made the playoffs and they've had various success, but you're not winning in this league if you don't have the QB. And that's the biggest thing. The Colts had a rookie QB last year. Deshaun was terrible for the Browns last year, and then he got injured, and they were just back and forth.
It didn't matter. They made the playoffs anyway.
And then
guy.
But that just even goes to show you how much the QB position matters. They lost their #1 running back, and it didn't matter. They still made the playoffs, and they were still that good. So that just even, like I said, it just reinforces the point more. And to you, like you said, Angelo, about Zamir White, that's another reason why the running back position, the bell cow position, is so lowly regarded. It's because I can just get somebody off the street undrafted. Austin Eckler was undrafted. That dude scored 40 touchdowns in 2 years consecutive, not 40 years each, or 40 touchdowns each, but 40 touchdowns combined in 2 years. So these guys are just the talent is out there, and because the shelf life of a running back is so much shorter than any other position, it probably is the shortest by far than any other position in the league. It's the teams just don't want to invest that much capital into them. That's like when you say, Rich, are we going to pay $13-14 million a year for someone like the Texans probably would, because they have the money to. They have a rookie QB. The Colts are another team I could see, but they just signed Jonathan Taylor. Naheem Hines is doing
$14 million a year for Jonathan Taylor.
Yeah. So and even with Jonathan Taylor, Naheem Hines was looking great for a while there. And I mean, he was toting the rock pretty damn well with Minshew under center. So
Zach Moss was pretty good when he was
Zach Moss was looking that. I'm sorry, not Naheem Hines. That's what I was thinking of. Zach Moss was who I was thinking of. Yes.
Yeah. So I completely agree with you there, Robert. I want to make sure we get enough time to go into our offensive line discussion, because I think that's such a critical position group on every team's roster.
Can't have bell cow running backs on no line.
Yeah, but yeah, exactly. Just on a side note, in terms of Filipino dishes, Ding Yuan is one of my favorite Filipino dishes.
Get out of here! Really?
And
wow!
And I'm sure that is going to shock you in particular, given the fact that
100% shocks me. 100% shocks me.
Yeah.
And you actually know what it is?
Yuan.
Yes, I do.
Wow, that's crazy. Well, I know that when I was going to the Ontario area when I was going to your area for boxing and MMA and whatnot, there's a huge Filipino contingency in that entire community, like huge. So it wouldn't surprise me that you've tasted Filipino dishes, but it does surprise me that you like dinuguan. Because dinuguan, do you know what it is, Alex? What dinuguan is?
No, I just
no idea, Robert. Okay, so if you ever go to a Filipino party, or you're going to your Filipino friends, and then they offer you this thing that's like black. That's going to taste delicious, by the way. It's going to be amazing. And then when you ask them, what is it, right? They're just going to look at you and go, it's like chocolate soup, man. Like, just, try it out. See if you like it. And then you're going to love it. You're going to be like, oh, this is amazing. But what it actually is, guys, is so it's a bunch of different pig parts. But, to be fair, let me just say in a more gourmet-ish way, we could probably get away with giving it to you as some pork belly with some pork shoulder and some pig ears and maybe some intestine in there and whatnot, right? But
you lost me.
Okay, relax, man. But the main ingredient is that turns it into the soup is actual pork blood. And this is one of the dishes that was made in the country where I grew up because when you when you had your own farm, you grew your own pig, you didn't want to waste any part of the animal at all. So, but it does 100% surprise me, Rich, that you like dinuguan, because that's crazy, man. That's crazy. And would you say to people like Alex and Robert that it is delicious? It is super delicious.
It's fantastic, but you have to understand is I also come a family background where, we're basically send us out to the backwoods and come find us in 5 years and we'll be fine.
You're the freaking meat man. Right? What's that guy on Instagram? The liver king, dude.
I was voted the most likely to survive in an apocalypse out of my classes in every single group.
Love that.
You're wearing the perfect outfit for The Last of Us, the show The Last of Us.
Yeah.
So with that in mind, let's transition over to the offensive line. My Denver Broncos are in a somewhat of an interesting position when it comes to the offensive line. We touched on this last week and the week before. We have two higher priced free agents, which I personally believe, frankly, I thought Powers would have done better. I thought McGlinchey had potential, but he didn't transition particularly well. But I did think that Powers was kind of like the opposite of what I thought Chandler Jones would be for the Raiders, which was I thought that Powers had the skill sets to transition into a Sean Payton offense better than he did. And I was wrong. I was just wrong. And so I think it's important to admit when you got things right. And I think it's also important to admit when you get things wrong. And I think that's why I hope at least, people that follow the show can kind of take what I say to the bank. Because if I mess up, I'll tell you. And if I get it right, I'll also tell you. And I think that's
you won't just tell us.
Yeah. And I think that's an important thing, right? Which is, there's certain things that if I get wrong, I'll say why I got it wrong. And also the fact that I got it wrong. And I think that that's kind of the value add there, because I like to assess why I was mistaken. And I think that's an important thing to do is, if you actually want to get better at anything, you need to figure out, why you got it wrong in the first place. So Powers didn't actually transition particularly well into his role with the Denver Broncos. He failed pretty miserably actually in the pass protection game. And McGlinchey was equally as poor in the pass protection game.
Mm-hmm.
Both of them did okay in run blocking, but and there's a nice big kind of star beside both of those names, which is they only did well in run blocking against certain defensive schemes. Against other defensive schemes, they also did poorly, even in the run blocking, where they got overpowered or pushed back or beaten to their spot or whatever the case may be. It just simply depended on who they were up against. And it actually mainly came down to defensive style on the opponent, as opposed to maybe overall scheme. It was more like what the style of the person was that they were going against. At the end of the day, you need to be good, really good at one and average at the other. And if I'm going to look at the Denver offensive line, the guy that is in that mold is my man, which is Quinn Miners.
Yep.
I had him pegged as soon as he came out of college. I said, that's the guy.
Yeah, that's the
that
guy.
The guy. And he, for those of you who don't know, Quinn Miners is the guy as the offensive lineman. He's a guard for the Denver Broncos.
With dreads.
He has kind of like
he's the white guy with dreads.
Yeah, white dude with dreads. He also trains.
Cried about the Chiefs for no reason.
Yeah,
and they didn't even play him.
He actually trains in the off season up here near where I live.
Oh, cool.
He trains on an island that his uncle owns or owns a part of property on, and he basically his training regime is like lifting logs and like moving rocks.
Like Rocky IV.
Yeah,
I love it. I love it.
Chicago.
And so we've got tons of video and the footage on that sort of thing, which I think is amazing. And the other thing that I actually got into a bit of a Twitter battle and YouTube battle with a Jaguars fan. We've had him on the show, Alex Jen Jag, for one of our segments. He is a huge advocate to try to get the Jaguars to sign Lloyd Cushenberry. To which I said, please do. But
you hate Kush.
Don't say I didn't warn you. My thing with him is more Kush for the push, which is he's had one good year with the Denver Broncos. He really did show out. Credit to him. He showed out really well last year. So I don't want to completely slander him, but 1 year doth not a fantastic re-sign make, in my opinion, and especially in a contract year, which Alex, you said contract years are undefeated.
It's easy to give it your all when you don't know what you're making next year.
So, in my opinion, that's a huge issue for the Denver Broncos. He's had mediocre to awful years up until that point, and then a very good year. And I'm more inclined to think that once you get the bag, you're likely to revert to where you were before rather than where you are now, because I think the incentives are somewhat lost. Because if you weren't motivated before, you sure as heck aren't going to be motivated after you get lots of money. Yeah. And I think that's why you look at guys like Von Miller, who didn't really have a drop off. He really did put effort in throughout, regardless of getting paid or not. LT is another example of that, and some other guys throughout the NFL where, money was just, the thing. It wasn't the motivator for them. Max Crosby, I'd argue, is another example of a guy who got the bag and basically hasn't missed a beat. And he's an example within our division. Chris Jones is another example within the division too, who said, hold my beer, let me show you what money gets you. And then proceeded to do even better than he did the year before, right? So I think that's a huge testament to character, individual, and that sort of thing. So in terms of starting lineup, and then on top of that, again, I have a somewhat unpopular opinion within Broncos country, and my answer to that is I don't care. I'm not a huge fan of Garrett Bowles overall as a left tackle. I believe that he's done well in certain situations, but he has benefited tremendously from the league not calling holds the last 2 years based on his style of play. And so my point is, just because he hasn't gotten the penalties doesn't mean he's not committing them.
Right.
And you're basically 1 year away from him being, again, one of the most penalized offensive linemen in the league. And I think you need to be very, very careful with that. So as I look overall, and I mean, being honest with my Denver Broncos and how we look, I really do believe that despite our stats looking fantastic on the offensive line, it's one of those stats tell a story if you look at them a certain way, right? If you only look at stats through a certain lens, they will tell you almost whatever you want there.
Yeah, that's why I said Last of Us. That character
He's
he's
just like
talking
Nick
about.
Nick Alderman
Nick
or
Offerman.
Offerman.
It's Nick Offerman.
Yeah. So the issue that I have is as you go from left to right, you got Garrett Bowles, who I think while he's not been penalized as much the last year or two, and statistic-wise because of that has looked better. I think that if you're going to actually analyze his play, has not excelled to the level that people think he has. And then I think you have Powers, who may be struggling to overcompensate for Garrett Bowles' struggles on the left-hand side. So maybe that's part of the issue there. So I might be willing to give Powers a 1-year pass if a competent left tackle comes in Garrett Bowles' place. But I'm normally not that kind, so probably not either there as well. Lloyd Cushenberry, I was calling for last year needing to be replaced, and that has not changed. That has not changed at all.
Okay.
And replace him more, if anything.
And Miners is really the only guy that I want us to re-sign tomorrow.
Okay.
Because I think he's a guy who's got the work ethic. I think he's the type of guy that's got that Max Crosby grit to him. And Angelo, you know exactly what I mean when I say that. I think that's an incredibly important character trait to have for alignment. And then the other issue I have here is the depth behind everybody. We had limited depth behind a lot of these positions, whereby we were incredibly fortunate to not have tremendous injuries. Cam Fleming was the major competent backup that we had on that line, and then we had a lot of question marks aside from that. So I really do think that the Broncos need to put quite a bit more oomph, if you will, behind the offensive line if we're going to do well. And I say all that to say this, which is, Alex, I've stayed consistent on my thought process here, which is the Chiefs had a pretty darn good offensive line as well as Alex Smith. And they realized that they needed to upgrade the quarterback to get themselves to the next level. The Broncos, and my issue with the Broncos, is their offensive line is not great, but we also didn't have a great quarterback. And as a result, our record was not great either.
Right.
So the question then becomes, do you build the offensive line and then get the quarterback? Or do you get the quarterback and then try to build the offensive line? Now, my approach, and I'm happy to have someone tell me why I'm wrong, is to build out the offensive line and the defensive lines first, and then if you have to, trade some capital to go get your quarterback. Because I think that the quarterback, if you ever want them to succeed, needs to not feel that they're going to get their head ripped off tomorrow. And that's my general mindset. And so for my Denver Broncos, my opinion here would be to reposition and trade away some of the players on our roster, build out the offensive line, build out the defensive line. It'll make the back end of your roster and the defense and the offense look better. So your running backs, like we were just talking about earlier, will run the ball better because they have better blocking. Your pass catchers will be able to catch the ball better because even a poor quarterback will then have more time to throw, which gives them a better opportunity to get the ball into wide receivers' hands. And then once you get yourself to that point, you don't mind giving up a couple first-round picks to go then get your quarterback and have them be your franchise dude and grow behind a more competent offensive line for the next 2 to 3 years and then pay them the bag that they deserve at that point after them growing to fill into that starting quarterback role. And that's really been what the Broncos' Achilles heel has been, is that we haven't done that. We haven't actually developed and worked with players and then had competent starters and then build depth behind them. Those are all major things that my Denver Broncos have not done particularly well over these past years. And that's kind of where I'm at with the offensive line, generally speaking, which is I think we actually need 4 new dudes. I think realistically you're going to probably have 3. And at least 2 of those 3, air quotes, will actually be seen as backups, but ultimately and likely become starters at some point.
Yeah.
What are you doing about them being signed to such big contracts? You're just cutting them
I
all?
was going to say, McGlinchey's got a pretty big deal.
That's your problem. Your problem is you're committed, right? Like you have the problem that the Raiders don't have, in that the majority of our linemen are all going to be free agents anyway. So we could try to work them in, or we can go a different direction. In your scenario, almost all your linemen are in these huge contracts. So what are you doing with it?
Well, I think that's why Cushenberry walks, and I think that's why we're going to probably move forward with one of our younger guys at center who I don't think will do particularly well. And I think that we will hopefully re-sign Miners early to allow his contract to be spread out over a longer period of time, I would hope, because he is well worth it, in my opinion. He has shown tremendous growth.
Yeah.
Like he is that good. And my hope would be that the Broncos understand that they made an error, but will then take those high-priced contracts, convert them as backups for the last, like midway through this year. I hope that they still play the best guys, which I suspect will actually be the young draft picks as opposed to the guys that we signed, and then allow that this year to be their last year on their deal, and then do the mental math on their contracts, which is, cutting them saves us this, keeping them has us spending this. Time to bite the bullet and keep with the young guy and keep with this drafting talent churn that I was just talking about earlier. And I think that will be the way that the Broncos should do things going forward. Now, will they? That's yet to be seen, but that is certainly the way that the best teams in the league do it. The Chiefs have done it with their secondary and other position groups. You've seen other successful teams like the Ravens, for example, who have been perpetual playoff team, do it with their position groups. And frankly, in my opinion, it's about time that the Broncos do it with our position groups. So that's kind of my general concept and my theory for my Denver Broncos in terms of where I think we're at. I'll throw over to you, Angelo, to talk about your Las Vegas Raiders, and anyone in the chat, whether or not you're a Broncos fan or not. Go ahead and throw your comments in terms of what you thought about what I said in the comment section here, and we'll throw them up on screen.
Hey, so before I start on the Raiders, the one thing I want to ask you then, as the Broncos fan, and so much details about them, is with the plan you're saying, that makes sense to me. I think that makes sense to Robert, makes sense to Alex. I don't think that makes sense to Sean Payton, because it basically would mean that Sean Payton's going to be a losing coach next year also, and probably a losing coach the year after that too. The way you're rebuilding it. You don't think so?
I don't think so. I don't think so, because I think that he has a large cohort of competent coaches, and scheme and coaching matters. So when you target the right guys and put them in the right position, you can mask inexperience by putting them in the right spot to do the right thing. And Sean Payton is very good at doing that. I mean, he made Russell Wilson look like a competent quarterback last year.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, we can talk about that nonsense that I saw from that I Am Athlete podcast earlier this week, and go right down that rabbit hole. But we don't have enough time on the show. But the point is that with the right coaching, you can pivot and adjust a poor roster to make it look way better than it actually is.
Right.
And I believe that with the right coaches like a Sean Payton, I think Andy Reid is certainly in that conversation as well, where he had wide receivers that were legitimately struggling, and he made adjustments as well as challenging those players to do better. I think with the right coaches and the right motivation and all the right things, you can take below average and or inexperience and push it to become elevated. And frankly, that can also accelerate growth as well, right? If you got a guy like Miners who came out of a D2 school, who who had no
D3.
business. He has no business being as good as he is right now based on draft status, right?
Yeah.
In school. I mean, he's certainly on pace right now to get quite the contract.
Right.
Right. So, anyways, over to your Raiders. But that's my general concept, which is I think coaching and scheme matters and fit matters, and I think that you can pivot in such a way and manipulate in such a way to make the bad look decent and to make the decent look great.
Right. Well, for our Raiders, shout out, by the way, Jack Kenna. But for our Raiders, we're in a position of growth. We're not in a position of let's do what you just did, Rich. That's not where we're at. Now there is, because Telesco's been doing all his interviews at the Combine this week. There's this feeling that we're probably going to completely revamp our entire offensive line, right? I think you mentioned this earlier in the show, Rich, that if we were to do something like that, the problem now becomes the chemistry. There's a certain chemistry that needs to get built with O-line. And I think you could agree with this, Alex, right? Like, you can't just say, this dude's talented, this dude's talented, this dude's talented. Let's put them all together, and it's all going to work in the first year. That's usually not how the that's usually not how the O-line works. So this is where, when I'm talking to the Raider Nation, hopefully you guys don't get so mad at me about this. We can't just say, oh, we're going to let Van Roten walk, and we're going to let Grassu walk, and because there is a certain level of chemistry in that room that I think Telesco himself is trying to figure out. Now, you couple that with the fact that we just hired James Craig, who's now our O-line coach. This is where, when I mentioned this to you last week, it is possible that Cushenberry could end up coming to the Raiders, and people like a Damian Lewis could come to the Raiders, because those are the guys that got the Joe Moore Award back at LSU when James Craig was coaching them, right? New offensive line coach could usually mean new offensive line. So with that said, is it possible that we re-sign Andre James? There's probably a good group of Raider fans that are saying, yeah, let's sign Andre James, without really realizing that re-signing Andre James could cost up to as high as a $9 million hit or something, instead of just letting him go, let him test out the market. And then if he wants to come back for something smaller, then that would be, great. Versus how much is Cushenberry really going to cost us? I don't think he's going to cost us that much, especially since Denver wants to get rid of him so bad. And Cushenberry might sit there and go, I want to come to Vegas, and I want to go ahead and play for my old coach. So the main guy that we have is Colton Miller, right? And lucky for us, we drafted him. And lucky for us, he's our captain, and he's the glue that's going to hold it all together. As far as everyone else, Andre James is going to be a free agent. Greg Van Roten's going to be a free agent. Jermaine Illuminor is going to be a free agent. Hronis Grassi is going to be a free agent. Brandon Parker's going to be a free agent. So what we're playing with in our Raider O-line right now is we got Thayer Mumford at right tackle, who showed sparks, did well. We have Dylan Parham, where everybody's seeing it, and they're like saying, well, we drafted him. He could play left guard. He could be a center. And then we also have all these other guys. Like, you're going to laugh when I say this, Robert, but we have DJ Fluker, who Telesco drafted, right? But he is on our
Fluker.
We do have him on our reserves for a reason, I think. We have him on our reserves for a reason. We have Ben Brown, who was with the Bengals, who could play center and guard. He's on our reserves. Jalen McKenzie from USC. Dalton Wagner, who Captain always talks about because he loves Dalton Wagner. And he's pretty good talent from Arkansas. And we have him too. So there's a group that's on that reserves contract that I know is going to get a shot with James Craig and learning that system and seeing what Luke Getsy can do with them, right? And then we're at 13. This is why I was kind of asking you this, Rich. Is at 13, I'm the guy that's been saying, I really don't think it's a good idea for us to trade up if it's going to cost so much. And the more I hear the combine talks and the more, like everybody, like they're upping that price more and more just to go get the quarterback that you want. In my opinion, if everybody's playing that game, great. By the time we get to 13, if it looks like we didn't get our guy, let's say it's Talisi Fuaga, because Talisi Fuaga is rising up higher, right? Why take a JC Latham at 13 when we could trade down? And trading down might possibly give us a chance to get more picks and get someone like, I don't know, Jackson Powers Johnson, who I absolutely love if we could pick him up in the late 20s. And I'm just saying, if Chris Jones is going to be in our division, then I kind of need a young dude that can handle it a little bit, right? Like, can be trained to handle this stuff. And then I'll go ahead and I'll keep someone like a Grassu or a Van Roten to kind of help teach a guy like Jackson Powers Johnson. So there's a lot of different directions. We can go younger in our own line. Another thing is free agency. And you guys have heard me say this now twice on back-to-back shows that I effing love Michael Onwenu that's coming from the Patriots. He's only 26 years old. The guy is not only a solid right tackle for the Patriots, but really he's a guard, man. And he can play either one, but if we sign him to a contract, like a real big contract, and he's ours, then we can solidify that right side a little bit with some strength and some experience. And then now whoever we do draft, whether it ends up being someone like a Zach Zinter later on or whoever, and we're still going to have a lot of these guys that will most likely be coming back anyways. We're going to be able to solidify the line. So what's fun for us with the Raiders is there is a lot of different directions, and it's kind of like the quarterback thing. You're going to hear the Raider Nation kind of split on their opinions. Do we want to sign Illuminor? Some people say no, but if you listen to Max Crosby's podcast, Max Crosby and Antonio Pierce both said that the strongest person in the entire Raider team is Jermaine Illuminor. So why would you get rid of your right side when he's the strongest person? And when you look at like the PFF charts on free agent tackles, Illuminor is number 6. So really, I still think we can get Illuminor on a pretty friendly contract. So we keep someone like Illuminor. Again, the big get for me would be if we could somehow get someone like Michael Onwenu. I know that it's Kevin Dotson, I think that's out there that people are talking about, but I still feel like I'd go Onwenu over someone like a Dotson. And then, yeah, man, just on the draft, and I know we're going to get a chance to talk about the draft a little bit, but some of the names that I really like that we could all possibly get because of where we're drafting is there's Troy Fountainow, Talisi Fuaga, Cooper Beebe, J.C. Latham, Amarius Mims, Jackson Powers Johnson, Tyler Guyton. I mean, Tyler Guyton is a guy who I thought originally was going to drop the 13, and then he did so awesome with his long arms and then just capturing everyone on that right tackle side during the Senior Bowl that now he might go late first, right? So that's why with the 13th pick, rather than let's trade up to go get our quarterback, how about let's trade down? Let's go build this line, or let's get some of our future pieces for this line. But again, what's fun about the Raiders is we're going to see what they do. I'm trusting Telesco. I want to mention that it's been fun to watch him do the interviews at the combine because you can kind of tell, like, all right, man, this guy, he's a great yang to Antonio Pierce's yin, right? Where Pierce is sitting there and he's like, we're going to go get him. I love Jaden Daniels. We'll trade whatever. Let's go get him. And Telesco's like, Aiden O'Connell did awesome. Aiden O'Connell was great. And I don't think anyone should be putting that away, that he was. So it'll be interesting to see where we end up.
Strong word.
Yeah. Well, Telesco talked him up, though. Telesco talked up Aiden O'Connell this week so far during the combine. And it'll just be interesting. But for sure, we're going to have a solidified offensive line that is going to be super focused, not so much on pass protection, but on the run game. Because that's what Luke Getsy brings. That's why we got James Craig, right? People Remember, LSU also had some really great running games when James Craig was there. So where I'm at is it could be either one of any of those guys that are in free agency that we could re-sign to a pretty modest contract. See, even Jack Kenneth saying he'd rather re-sign Illuminor, right? And I know, like, your Bronco guy right there is saying we don't want Cushenberry, but Cushenberry being coached by the guy that helped them get the Joe Moore Award might not be the worst scenario for us. And if it's a question of Andre James is going to cost closer to $9 million a year, or we can get Cushenberry at a really steal price, I'd still rather take Cushenberry. I watched the tapes on him. He wasn't that. I mean, I get that you weren't happy with him, Rich, but just seeing what we could do with a guy like that, let him compete. Let him compete. But if we were to draft someone like Jackson Powers Johnson, I'm one of the Raider fans that's going to be 100% on board with something like that. We draft Jackson Powers Johnson, and then right after that, we draft Tyler Guyton. Can you guys imagine us trading down and then on back-to-back picks go Jackson Powers Johnson, Tyler Guyton? We pretty much then solidified it right there, fixed our right side. But we'll see. We'll see what happens with the free agency. And I want to give you some time with that, Alex, because I know you guys have some O-line stuff you got to deal with too, right?
You're on mute.
Oh,
You're on mute.
Yeah, you're on mute, Alex.
You're
on mute.
Sorry, guys. I've been blowing my nose out, so I didn't want people to hear all that. But yeah, I mean, the Chiefs just have one pending free agent, and Donovan Smith at left tackle. I mean, outside of that, pretty solidified. And Joe Toney, Creed Humphrey, and Trey Smith. Jawan Taylor signed a $80 million contract last year, so he's definitely going to be sticking around. But yeah, so I think the only question mark with the Chiefs is what are they going to do to fix the hole that's at left tackle right now. And I think it's an interesting one because, when they signed Jawan Taylor, there was rumblings that they might move him to left or, because the guy is a good pass blocker. He's very, I guess, in terms of, if you look at PFF stuff, he doesn't give up a very good pressure percentage. So he's, at least efficient in that regard. Might be because he's going a little early from the snap or holding, but, we'll let that is what it is. But, they're not moving on from him regardless of him being the most penalized tackle this last year or not. There's just really no way of getting around the contract after 1 year. I do see them restructuring his deal, though, to open up more cap. But, yeah, so we're pretty much stuck with, question mark at left tackle. Donovan Smith kind of did – serviceable enough, right, because they won the Super Bowl, but that wasn't the Flex Seal short-term fix that they thought he would be, and maybe, as an aging left tackle that was up there in terms of the better ones at one point in his career, and then, off his original team. So, I think it's going to be interesting. I think that you see the Chiefs I see them either valuing tackle in free agency or valuing early in the draft. And I think that it's vice versa with that with the wide receiver. I think we see him look at a wide receiver, give someone a little bit more money in terms of free agent pool between a tackle or wide receiver, and then look to spend that, early draft pick at 32 at the other position. So that's kind of why I wanted to say wide receiver. I just think those are the two most glaring holes, if assuming Chris Jones is back and everything else. So, looking at the free agents out there, there's really not any in terms of tackle and I think Tyrone Smith is the only one, and you're kind of talking about the same thing that with Donovan Smith. Yeah. Ironically enough, too, they both are Smith, but Tyrone Smith definitely was way better, at the focal point of his career. But I think that's kind of the same jersey. Yeah. Hey, right, you probably, but he's an injury-prone guy, and I think that's, I think you see him make a move like that if, 1 year, $9-10 million deal for someone who hasn't played a full season in a long time, and hope that it pans out. They also have Wanye Morris, who is a rookie that's had experience at left tackle and, you know, looked like a rookie, but also didn't look like a rookie at times. And Beach has always been a big proponent of, you know, giving the guys that he spends draft capital on a chance. So maybe they, you know, try to do that and look to bring in some competition in a second round or day 2 pick. But I think ultimately, with the people out there in free agency, we're going to look at the Chiefs drafting a tackle early. And, you know, whether that's a tackle to complement some competition is to be foreseen, because, you know, like I said, there's really Tyron Smith's the only guy out there. And then in terms of other options, I think Trenton Brown's out there, but Raiders fans know about him. And, you know, I don't think that's a viable option. You know, and the only other potential solution would be a guy like Mekhi Beckham in the Jets, who's towards the end of his rookie contract hasn't really lived up to it. And maybe the Jets are willing to, you know, trade him for a 3rd, 4th round pick, and they get 1 year out of him to see if they can get something different. And Beach has been
Mekhi's a free agent, actually. I think Mekhi Becton is a free agent.
Is he? I think he.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they probably didn't take his 5th year off.
Yeah. No.
Yeah.
I'm pretty
why
sure.
would you?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So Alex, you don't like Prince at all, huh? You don't like Prince, Tega, Wanagho at all, even a little bit?
No, I mean, well, I mean, something like there's definitely a clear difference from the starting 5 of the lineup and the depth pieces. And some guys are just like good enough to be a body in case something happens, but never good enough to be the guy. You know, and I think that's what Prince is. You know, he's an athletic tackle with all the tangibles and the size, but he can never put it together to be an elite tackle in this league. So, you know, I think of any people that are in the locker room now, Wanye Morris is the only guy to potentially take the role of left tackle. Otherwise, looking at some of the tackles in the draft, I'd say this is a pretty deep class in terms of tackles.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot, you obviously, all the guys you mentioned, they wouldn't be in on unless they were trying to trade up. But, you know, you're looking at Fantoni with Washington, is Morgan in Arizona, like the BYU guy. I really like Patrick Paul with Houston. But I mean, there's options out there. That's why I think that we see them spend an early pick, whether that's a 1st round if someone falls, or, you know, they take a 2nd round pick. That's how they've rebuilt their line. You know, because pretty much after the Bucs Super Bowl, they realized, like, crap, we got an aging offensive line. Like, they're on the downward. How do we rebuild this? And we've seen them every year, you know, spend a 2nd, 3rd round pick on someone. Fortunately enough, they've all hit, like Creed Humphrey, you know, one of the better centers in the league, and 2nd round pick Trey Smith. Trey Smith, one of the better right guards in the league, and he was a 6th round pick of a heart issue. I mean, so, you know, those things have worked out, but you've seen them, you know, the vision's been in play of, like, rebuild one by one and take an offensive lineman in early part of this draft. And I don't see him doing anything different here, especially because there is a glaring need right now at left tackle.
Yeah.
In my opinion here, I'm just going to jump in, is left tackle, in particular, left tackle. And this is, again, you know, there's just certain groups that are, you know, there's a reason why that they are where they're at. Left tackle is one of those positions that you were either picked in the top portion of the 1st round, and you were a starter, or you were a perpetual backup because you were not picked in the first half of the 1st round of the NFL draft. And that's seems to be generally how the NFL works, and how left tackles in particular generally work. So in terms of where you guys are at, Alex, and also based on salary and all the other stuff in terms of cap space and everything else, I think that you'd be you're in a unique position, actually, I would argue, where, you know, you've just won back-to-back. You're running it back with most of the same dudes. you can probably target and obtain quality depth and other positions, even with the capital that you would give up to move up a little bit. I think that this is your time. If I were you, again, throwing it out there, you move from 32 and you're going to want to aim to get up into the 11 to 15 range at the lowest. And you're going to want to get your guy. You're going to want to get your guy.
And they will be available at 11 through 15 because, like mentioned before, this is this is a tackle heavy draft, and those QBs are going to be flying off the board in the top 5, top 10. So I would not be shocked at all.
No, but Robert, that's what I was saying. It is a tackle heavy draft, and a lot of the people are saying at least 9 tackles are going to go. So I don't know if a Joe Alt or a Olu Fashanu is going to be available for Alex that high. So who are you?
Not. I mean, you could. I was gonna say you could target Grant Martin in the later rounds, Jordan Morgan, Kingsley Sumalatata. I mean, like there's some guys that'll be there just because of the other positions that are going to be taken, like QB, like wide receiver.
Yeah,
right.
That's it. That's why I said I think you see him move up due to a fall. I don't think you're going to see him be aggressive and like jump into
if their
15
guy falls
or higher. But they McDuffie fell in the draft and they moved up to get him. I think we will, and with how deep this tackle class at least looks now, like, things will certainly change once the combine happens and we start looking at all the other BS like hand size and everything else. But, someone's going to fall, like, especially with the, potential run on QBs and everything else, like someone's going to fall. And that's why I think you can see them make a move. Now, at the same time, I could also see him like trying to get Tyrone Smith and saying, okay, let's see what this year does. And just, and see if Wanye Morris can develop as well. So I don't know. It's like I said, it's a unique situation and they've handled it in 2 different ways when dealing with it in the past. So it'll be interesting to see which way they approach. But I do think that it kind of goes hand in hand with, what they do in free agent in terms of wide receiver. Because I think really it's looking at wide receiver or tackle are really the 2 biggest glaring needs. And that's who's going to be, it's one of those positions is what they're spending their first pick on. And, I think that it's totally indicative of who they go sign in free agency. And just looking at it, I see them probably draft or signing a wide receiver in free agency and then looking at this draft and the tackle and moving up with someone falling. I mean, it'd be awesome if they could get Alt because Alt, like his dad played for the Chiefs.
No, not happening.
That's not happening at all. Like I think realistically you'd be moving up to look at like Mims or Fuaga or maybe Latham, one of those 3 guys.
You could get Tyler Guyton.
You could get Morgan, I think, at 11 to 15. Like I said, depends where you would trade into.
Oh, you could get. I don't think they'd have to move up for Morgan, to be honest.
I didn't think you'd have to move up for Tyler Guyton either. Tyler Guyton might drop away.
But I don't know. It depends on how these other teams, because I feel like with tackles especially, it's like once one tackle goes, other teams are like, and then you see like we saw last year with Wright, Jones, like the 3 literally boom, 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 and saw someone jump in front of the Jets to get the Steelers jump in front of the Jets to get the tackle they want. So I think we see a similar situation like that play out, and maybe the Chiefs are the ones that jump in front of someone to get a tackle.
Hey, Alex, just last thing out of curiosity, you guys traded from 27 to 10 to get Patrick Mahomes, right? You traded 2 firsts and a third, I believe it was. What's the price for you to go from 32 up to high enough to go get Joe Alt? What would you be willing to give up if you knew Joe Alt? So let's say it goes quarterback, and all that. Then we get to Joe Alt, and he's available. What are you trading to get him?
I don't know. I'd say you probably have to give up another first round pick or maybe like your next year's pick, or at least like you probably like your first and second and another second and a third. Like it'd take a decent amount, but I just don't know, like, because because it's hard to assess from now because it's like every move up is to get a QB, and so teams know that you're moving up to get a QB, so you're getting your franchise guy. I need to gouge you. Whereas like if you're in the draft day moment of a team that doesn't really know what they want to pick, and the Chiefs are trying to move up, it might take a little less. I don't know. I definitely think it would involve some sort of package of 4+ picks to move up.
I agree with you on that. Just to quickly go into it before the show runs out, I've already talked about the Chargers O-line for a bit in previous shows, but to kind of just rehash it and to revisit it, this is all gonna, like the Raiders, depend on free agency and heavily with the draft and the direction that Harbaugh wants to go. He's obviously made it known that they want to make this a running team first and foremost, to not completely take, but to take a large load off of Herbert's shoulders. So I could definitely see us. I wouldn't be surprised if we took Joe Alt at 5. If he falls to us at 5, throw him at right tackle. You got Slater and Alt there, and you never got to worry about those for the next 10 years or so. Build that line, protect Herbert, get the running game going. But you know what? At the same time, too, we are also in a great position because this is a QB-heavy draft, and teams are going to be wanting to trade up into the top 5 to get their guy. And the Chargers should absolutely take advantage of this and build on the draft capital, move back, see if you can still get Bowers, maybe not move back completely out of the top 10, but see if you can move back to maybe the Bears want to come up to 5. After they take their quarterback at 1, they want to go get a wide receiver. They want to go get a weapon for their new drafted quarterback. Maybe you move back to 9 and you try to get Bowers there. Or you get another offensive tackle there. There's so many things that the Chargers can do in this draft, and it's beautiful because we finally have the vision and the coaching and the front office behind it to where I'm actually excited about having a top 5 pick versus before with this old management. It's like, oh God, who are they going to reach for? How are they going to jack this up? Are we going to draft another Melvin Gordon? Bosa was a great pick, but he's hurt and he has his issues as well. So there's just so many things that I've, as a Chargers fan, and Chargers fans know, in the past, it was a terrifying thing to draft, but I feel like now it's almost like no matter what the Chargers do, it's going to be Harbaugh's decision because he just has that power in the organization after that contract. And B, it's almost like you can't go wrong with whatever you do. You stay at 5 and you take your tackle that you want, and you take the player that you want at 5, that you're not going to let it up to fate. And if you have that guy where you're like, we are not letting him off, then absolutely go for it. Take him at 5. I'm never going to ever stop you from picking your guy. But if you have, your board's good enough and you think you're confident in trading back, absolutely we should trade back. And like you're saying, Angelo, rebuild this O-line, get a bunch of draft capital, get the depth up, because that is the one thing that has killed the Chargers their entire time is the depth. So if we could do that, I think it'll be really good. Obviously, just to recap, you got Slater at the left tackle. You need to find a center, JPJ. If you want to go
what I was
get him,
going to say, dude. I would trade back with the mindset of getting hit.
Yep, I would not be mad at that at all. So yeah, no, I'm sorry, Jack. Gordon was definitely drafted by the Chargers. But yeah, just to end it on that, I think that's where we sit right now currently.
Yeah, I mean, the biggest issue that you guys had is as part of your draft review of the Bosa brothers, obviously Joey in your case there, is the biggest thing that should have been on your list of do not draft is if you drink Smirnoff Ice, you should never be drafted in the NFL.
Bud Light seltzers.
I'm just gonna say that.
And then shortly thereafter is Bud Light seltzers.
Yep.
And any other drink with fruit in it.
You're a Truly guy, aren't you, Rich?
Pardon me?
I said you're a White Claw kind of guy.
What's a White Claw?
Ain't no laws.
That sounds about right.
That's your problem, and you're welcome. I've now taught your entire fan base and your front office the right way of drafting. Guinness is allowed, by the way, and frankly should be given an extra mark because that is a true man's drink. It can hold a spoon upright in it, and that is an appropriate thing to have. So again, these are all important things to look at when you're sourcing out football players for your team. For example, Max Crosby, I believe, is a Guinness guy, and that should tell you all you need to know. And so there you go. Anyways, with that in mind, ladies and gentlemen, I think this is a great show. If you have anything you'd like to say in terms of the offensive line in our respective teams, we're probably going to hash out maybe a little bit more of this on the next show, just to lead things off, to just kind of expand a little bit more, because I do believe this is in fact one of the most important position groups on any football team, and I actually don't know if it's actually close, to be quite honest. We're going to bring maybe a little bit more to this for next week's show, and then we'll start delving into some other position groups as well on each of our rosters, and go kind of group by group and position group by position group, what we need, what we have, et cetera, et cetera. Some great off-season content to kind of lead into things like free agency and the draft, because these are all relevant topics for all of our teams. If you have any questions that you would like, leave them below in the chat. If you have specific topics that you'd like for us to cover, our Twitter handles are all kind of generally below here, and the names here on the show. And ladies and gentlemen, until next week, where the West Side is the best side. Peace!